Weed, grass, pot, gas, reefer, whatever you want to call it, cannabis has been taking the country by storm for the past few years. At the time of recording this, it's been legalized in over 24 states. Even our neighbors up north and down south have legalized it nationwide. It seems more and more people are beginning to recognize that cannabis isn't the evil plant that we used to think it was, but it's important to still keep in mind that it is a drug, and just like any drug, it has potential to cause harm down the line to people who use it wrong. And yes, using it too soon is using it wrong. Now, you may be wondering why the hairy man is built like a palm tree is telling you that your teenage brain is too teenage for weed. And honestly, you're right in questioning people who tell you not to do something just because they said so. That's why I'm not even going to tell you not to smoke pot, because, clearly that works. I'm just going to show you the facts. It's up to you after all, whether you want to banish it from your life, hold off until you're an adult, or go out back and roll the shittiest joint the world has ever seen. I just want you to know what you're getting yourself into. Because I promise you, the science does tell us that it's probably a pretty bad idea to start using cannabis before you're an adult. Also, side note, adults, you're not that special. There's still some health and psychological consideration for you, but that's a topic for another video. So first things first, before we talk about how weed affects the teenage brain, we need to understand what the brain is supposed to be doing during those acne-filled years of our lives. There's a lot going on. Take your mouse off the back button, I see you there. I'll get to the weed stuff in a second, alright? Just hold on. There's a lot going on in the human body during this time, and pot can affect that. Now, this is a psychology/neuroscience video, so please don't ask me why you're going here down there. I will not be explaining that. So anyway, what's the brain up to? Well, a lot of things all at once. For starters, the neurons are busy up here getting dressed up all nice and fancy in this stuff called myelin. You can think of it as this interesting looking sleeve that covers our wires and makes the signals in our body travel stupid fast compared to unmyelinated neurons. That white matter stuff you may have heard of is white because of myelin. This is what lets different parts of your brain talk to each other super efficiently, which is literally what lets you think faster. Speaking of specific brain regions, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC, this part right here behind your 5 head, is one of the last parts to fully develop. That's because this part of the brain is involved in some pretty complex things, from concentration to problem solving to self-restraint. These are what we call executive functions. And as you can imagine, these are pretty important in our everyday lives. For example, this is what happens when you carefully plan your Halloween costume. And then this is what happens when you just put shit together in one day because your teenage ass did not think it through. One last thing to mention about the PFC, since it's more or less the reasonable part of the brain, among other things, is that since it's pretty undercooked for so long, that leaves other brain regions to be in charge of decision making. More specifically, the limbic system, a group of a whole bunch of structures in the brain that are responsible for things like memory, feelings, the reward pathway, which is involved in addiction. That long stretch of time where your limbic system's up and running without your PFC to, be reasonable, means that emotions like fear can play a much bigger role in your decision making than they really should. Like that time in middle school that I asked my crush to dance and spoke like 6 fucking words to her the whole night because I thought the world would end if I screwed up. Now there are many more things going on in the brain during the teenaging process, but I'm gonna assume that you're just gonna click off the video if I don't start talking about weed like right now, so here we go. For starters, let's look at how cannabis works. I'll just put up a picture here or something so you can see what it looks. You know what? Why didn't I just show you? Alright, so this is what weed looks like. So the main molecules in weed, your THC, CBD, etc., these are called cannabinoids, and they act on the endocannabinoid system, which is spread out all throughout your body, but has a lot of influence in your brain. This is because there are about 6 to 7 metric fuck tons of cannabinoid receptors in your brain, which then go on to receive these cannabinoids and kick off a whole lot of other stuff elsewhere in your brain. No, seriously, the list is way too long to show you right now, and they're just being added to like every day. I could make an entire new video about that. But this video is about teens, Mike. What does it do to the teenage brain? You might probably not be asking because talking to a screen's weird. Well, I'll tell you. One longitudinal study, which is where participants are observed over a long period of time, in this case about a decade, showed that using cannabis as a teenager led to thinning of the PFC, compared to both people who never used cannabis and people who waited until they were adults. This suggests that marijuana does hinder the development of the PFC, which we talked about earlier. And nobody wants to be known as that guy or gal who could have had a pretty thick prefrontal cortex. And it's not just the PFC that's affected, but also the connections between brain regions. Studies have revealed age-related impacts to the corpus callosum, which connects the left half of the brain to the right half of the brain, which this is my left, so left and right. Yeah. There are also effects on the connections between the PFC and other regions of the brain, and these connections are just as, if not more important than the brain regions themselves, because what good are they if they can't talk to each other? Over in the limbic system, two other structures that are affected by weed are the hippocampus, which plays a huge role in memory, and the amygdala, which is involved in emotions and decision making. And yes, we are pretty confident that this is likely due to getting high at a young age, because these structural changes seem to stop once adulthood is reached. Now that stuff's all fine and dandy. Well, okay, not really. But what effects might these structural changes have on our cognition, which is how we think or process things, you know, the non-physical stuff? Well, it doesn't look good either. Multiple studies have found significant negative impacts on learning, IQ, those executive functions I told you about earlier, inhibition. I mean, the list just goes on. And these changes don't go away in adulthood. Even if you stop smoking that Zaza, because these brain regions, you only get one shot to develop them, and the Zaza already beat the shit out of them and took their lunch money. Not only that, but there's also the risk of developing a cannabis use disorder. We are moving away from the word addiction because there's way too many fucking people who think that addict means person who has morally failed society and should be shunned and looked down upon. But that's beside the point. Let's get back on track here. Unfortunately, teens are quite a bit more susceptible to developing a use disorder than adults. Out of the people who start using weed as an adult, about 9 to 10% of those people will eventually develop a cannabis use disorder. But that number jumps to 16 to 17% in people who start as teens. That's roughly 1 in 6 people. Look, if you do a dice roll to get some shitty looking CS2 knife on a sketchy gambling website, all you lose is your parents' money. But if you do this dice roll, you could end up having a crippling dependence on marijuana, which is not the magical experience that you would think it is. I could make a whole separate video on cannabis use disorder that's separate from the adult weed video I mentioned earlier. You know, maybe I should. Now that the science is out of the way, I just want to remind you all that I do not expect to have caused some revelation in you or something like that. I know I'm just some random guy who popped up in your recommended with a big old leaf in the thumbnail. It's entirely up to you if you want to hit that fucking cart night. I'm just here to make sure that you know what that thing can do to you when you use it that early. One thing that I want to heavily emphasize is that weed doesn't only affect how you do in school. I say that because, let's be real, you probably don't give a shit when an adult tells you, hey, you're gonna do less good in that class that you hate. But it doesn't only do that. It also affects your memory overall, which, believe it or not, you use outside of school too. Not only that, but if we just ignore all of the long-term effects I told you about, the short-term effects can themselves have long-term effects. There's a lot you're learning about as a teen, not just in school, but in life. You're learning about life, sometimes on your own, sometimes with the help of somebody who's been there and done that. But weed hurts your brain's ability to remember the stuff you're learning right now about friendships, relationships, your identity. These are probably things you're going to want to remember as an adult. Now, one last thing. I am actually genuinely curious how this video affected your views about weed. So much so that I've included a quick survey down in the description. Shouldn't take you more than a few minutes to do. Or you can click the QR code right here. It's just a few questions about your opinions before and after watching the video. It's completely anonymous. All the required questions are multiple choice if that matters to you. You know, no one's gonna know that you specifically, you, Andrew, you are a die-hard stoner. No one's gonna know that. Not even me. Also, I'll give you a meme at the end for your troubles on the house. You know, that felt like a wink, but I don't actually think that was a wink. Well, that's all I have for you today. As I will try to do in all my videos, all of my sources are down in the description. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. Hope you liked the video and maybe you got something out of it. If you did like the video, please hit that like button. If you didn't like the video, then please smash that dislike button. But only if you did not like the video, please. Promise. And consider subscribing if you want. I'm starting this channel because I've always liked teaching people and being funny, or making jokes that may or may not be funny. And yeah, now that I'm about to graduate college, I figured why not start now? Hopefully I can educate and entertain with these videos, and hopefully you decide to tag along for the ride.